The snow began falling the moment Eloise Harper stepped through the church doors in her borrowed white dress, thick flakes drifting down from a gunmetal sky as if the heavens themselves wept for her humiliation. She stood at the altar of the small wooden church in Coloma, California, watching the last of the guests file out in uncomfortable silence, their pitying glances cutting deeper than any knife could, and she wondered how her life had unraveled so completely in the span of a single morning. The preacher cleared his throat, shuffling his worn Bible from hand to hand, clearly wanting to be anywhere but here, witness to this disaster. Eloise's father had already stormed out, his face purple with rage, and her mother had followed with tears streaming down her powdered cheeks, leaving their daughter alone at the altar where Thomas Crawford should have been standing beside her. The year was 1859, and Coloma had seen its share of excitement since gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill 11 years prior, but the town had quieted considerably as the easy pickings ran out and the fortune seekers moved on to fresher claims. What remained was a hardscrabble community of miners, shopkeepers, ranchers, and the women who tried to make homes in this rough country. Eloise had been born here, the daughter of the town's assayer, raised with the expectation that she would marry well and maintain the family's respectable position. Thomas Crawford, the son of a successful merchant, had seemed like the perfect choice, handsome and charming with his smooth words and expensive suits brought all the way from San Francisco. But Thomas Crawford had not appeared at the church that morning. His best man had arrived instead, red-faced and stammering, to announce that Thomas had taken the morning stage to Sacramento with Victoria Pemberton, the widow who owned the dress shop on Main Street. They had been carrying on an affair for months, it seemed, right under everyone's noses, and now they were gone, leaving Eloise standing in a borrowed dress because her own wedding gown had been ordered from Victoria's shop and was presumably somewhere between here and Sacramento, along with the woman who had stolen her intended husband. Eloise felt the humiliation burning in her chest, making it hard to breathe in the tight bodice. She had given up everything for this marriage, turned down other suitors, spent the last year planning and preparing, endured her mother's endless instructions on how to be a proper wife. She had even kissed Thomas behind the livery stable last month, let him hold her closer than was proper, and now everyone would assume she had given him more than that. The gossip would be vicious and unrelenting. No decent man would want her now. She would be the girl who was left at the altar, forever marked by another man's rejection. "Miss Harper," the preacher said gently, "perhaps you should go home now. There's nothing more to be done here." Eloise looked down at the small bouquet of winter flowers in her hands, gathered that morning when she still believed this day would be the beginning of her happy life. The snow was falling harder now, visible through the church's simple windows, unseasonable for California even in late December. She had heard that the mountains got snow, but here in the foothills it was rare enough to seem like an omen. "I am not going anywhere," she heard herself say, her voice stronger than she felt. "I came here to get married, and that is what I intend to do." The preacher blinked at her in confusion. "But Miss Harper, there is no groom." "Then I will find one," Eloise said, surprising herself with the words even as she spoke them. Something had shifted inside her in that moment, some core of steel she had not known she possessed. She would not slink away in shame. She would not give Thomas Crawford and Victoria Pemberton the satisfaction of destroying her life. She would not face years of pitying looks and whispered gossip, would not become an old maid living in her father's house, unwanted and unmarked. Before the preacher could respond, the church door opened with a gust of cold air and swirling snow. A man stepped inside, stamping his boots on the wooden floor, brushing flakes from his broad shoulders. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn denim trousers, a heavy coat, and a hat dusted white with snow. Eloise recognized him vaguely as one of the ranch hands from the bar spread that bordered her father's property on the eastern side, though she could not recall his name. He had come to town for supplies, most likely, seeking shelter from the unexpected storm. The cowboy looked up, taking in the scene with observant eyes. The empty church with its evergreen boughs and ribbons meant for a wedding, the preacher in his formal clothes, and Eloise standing alone at the altar in her white dress. His face was weathered from years in the sun, probably in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble and dark eyes that seemed to see more than most men looked for. "Pardon the interruption," he said, his voice low and rough around the edges. "I was heading back to the ranch when the snow started coming down. Thought I might wait it out here if that is acceptable." "There was supposed to be a wedding," the preacher explained unnecessarily, "but the groom has not arrived, so the church is not in use. You are welcome to stay until the weather clears." The cowboy's gaze moved back to Eloise, and she saw something flicker in his expression, recognition perhaps, or understanding. "I heard something about a wedding in town today. Harper, was it not? The assayer's daughter." Eloise lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness in front of this stranger. "That is correct. I am Eloise Harper, and I was indeed supposed to be married today." "But your groom did not show," the cowboy said, and it was not a question. News traveled fast in a small town, even news that was only hours old. Someone must have spread the word already, probably multiple someones, the gossip racing through Coloma like wildfire through dry grass. "He did not," Eloise confirmed, her voice tight. "He chose to leave town with another woman instead." The cowboy was quiet for a moment, studying her with those dark, thoughtful eyes. Then he did something Eloise never expected. He walked forward, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, coming to stand before her at the altar. Up close, she could see that his eyes were brown, deep and warm despite the cold outside, and his face, while rough, had an honest quality to it that Thomas Crawford's handsome features had lacked. "Madam," he said, removing his hat and holding it in both hands, "I do not know you well, but I know of you. I know your father to be a fair man, and I have seen you in town and thought you carried yourself with grace. If you truly meant what you said about intending to marry today, then I will marry you." The church went absolutely silent except for the wind outside and the slight creak of the building settling. Eloise stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What did you say?" "I said I will marry you," the cowboy repeated, his voice steady and sure. "I have got a job at the Bar B Ranch, steady work and decent pay. I have got savings put aside, enough to start building something of my own eventually. I do not drink to excess. I do not gamble more than a friendly hand of cards now and then, and I do not run around with other women. I am not saying I am some great catch, but I am here, and I am willing, and I give you my word I would treat you with respect and work hard to provide for you." Eloise felt dizzy, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This stranger, this cowboy she barely knew, was offering to marry her. It was insane. It was impossible. It was also, perhaps, the answer she needed. "I do not even know your name," she whispered. "Samuel Brennan," he said. "Most folks call me Sam. I have been working at the Bar B for 3 years now, came out from Missouri when I was 20. I am 25 now, in case you are wondering. I have got no wife, no children, no entanglements. I am free to marry if I choose, and I am choosing now." "But why?" Eloise asked, searching his face for some sign of deception or ulterior motive. "Why would you do this? You do not know me. I could be terrible. I could be cruel or stupid or lazy." Samuel's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "I have seen you in town, like I said. I have seen you help Mrs. Chen carry her packages when she was struggling. Seen you stop to talk to old Pete when everyone else crosses the street to avoid him and his rambling stories. I have seen you gentle with animals and patient with children. Maybe I do not know you, but I have seen enough to think you are a good woman who has been dealt a bad hand today. That still does not explain why you would marry me," Eloise pressed, needing to understand. Samuel looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "Truth is, I have been thinking lately that it is time to start building a real life, not just drifting from job to job. I want land of my own, a home, maybe a family someday. I want something that matters. But I am just a cowboy with no family name, no connections, nothing to offer a respectable woman. You need someone to save you from humiliation and ruin. I need someone to help me build a life worth living. Seems like maybe we could help each other." It was the most pragmatic proposal Eloise had ever heard, and yet there was something in his voice, a vulnerability in his honesty, that touched her more deeply than Thomas Crawford's flowery declarations ever had. This man was not promising her romantic love or fairy tale happiness. He was offering her a partnership, a way forward, a chance to salvage something from this disaster. The preacher cleared his throat. "Miss Harper, you cannot seriously be considering this. You do not know this man. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not something to be entered into on a whim." "Is it any more of a whim than marrying Thomas Crawford?" Eloise asked, her voice sharp. "I have known Thomas for 2 years, and it turns out I did not know him at all. At least Samuel Brennan is honest about what he offers and what he wants in return." She turned back to Samuel, studying his face, trying to see into his soul through his eyes. She saw steadiness there and strength, and something that might have been loneliness. He was taking a risk too, she realized. He was offering to tie his life to a woman he barely knew, to take on the responsibility of a wife with no guarantee that she would be worth the trouble. "If I say yes," Eloise said slowly, "I would expect to be treated as an equal partner, not as property. I can read and write and do figures as well as any man. I have skills and intelligence, and I would want to use them." "I would expect nothing less," Samuel replied. "I need a partner, not a decoration." "And I would expect fidelity," Eloise continued, her voice hardening. "I will not be made a fool of again." "You have my word," Samuel said solemnly. "If I make a promise, I keep it. I am promising you now that I would be faithful." Eloise took a deep breath, feeling as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind her was the safe, known world of her father's house, years of spinsterhood and shame stretching out in predictable misery. Before her was the unknown, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Samuel Brennan might be a stranger, but he was here, and he was offering her a future. "Then I say yes," Eloise said, and heard her voice ring out clear and strong in the small church. "I will marry you, Samuel Brennan." The preacher sputtered. "Miss Harper, please think about this. Your parents should be consulted. There should be a proper courtship. This is madness." "My parents left me here alone," Eloise said coldly. "They did not stay to comfort their daughter in her humiliation. As for courtship, I courted Thomas Crawford in the proper fashion, and you see how that turned out. No, Preacher Williams, I have made my decision. Will you perform the ceremony, or should Samuel and I ride to the next town to find someone who will?" Preacher Williams looked between them, clearly torn between his sense of propriety and his duty as a man of God. Finally, he sighed deeply. "If you are both certain, both freely choosing this, then I will perform the ceremony. But I want it noted that I advised against haste." "Noted," Samuel said dryly. "Can we proceed?" The preacher opened his Bible with shaking hands, finding the page for the marriage ceremony. Eloise realized suddenly that she was still holding the bouquet meant for her wedding to Thomas, and it seemed wrong to use it now. She set it aside on the front pew and turned to face Samuel Brennan, the stranger who was about to become her husband. Outside, the snow fell harder, blanketing Coloma in white, muffling the sounds of the town. Inside the church, Preacher Williams began to read the familiar words, his voice gaining strength as he went through the ancient ritual. Samuel stood straight and tall beside Eloise, his weathered face serious, his dark eyes never leaving hers. There was no ring, Eloise realized. Thomas had the ring she was supposed to wear, probably in his pocket as he rode away to Sacramento. As if reading her thoughts, Samuel reached into his own pocket and pulled out a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before she passed and told me to give it to a good woman when I found one. If you would accept it, I would be honored for you to wear it." Eloise felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. This rough cowboy, offering her his mother's ring, showed more genuine care in that moment than Thomas Crawford had in 2 years of courtship. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The preacher continued through the vows, and Eloise repeated the words that would bind her life to Samuel's, words that felt more weighty and real than they had during all the rehearsals with Thomas. When it came time for Samuel to repeat his vows, his voice was low but firm, each word a promise she believed he meant to keep. "You have a ring?" Preacher Williams asked, and Samuel slipped his mother's gold band onto Eloise's finger. It was slightly too large, but Eloise closed her hand into a fist, holding it in place, determined not to lose this precious thing. "By the power vested in me," Preacher Williams intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Samuel hesitated, clearly unsure, and Eloise realized that despite the vows they had just exchanged, they were still strangers. The thought of kissing him felt both terrifying and strangely thrilling. She leaned forward slightly, giving him permission, and Samuel bent his head to press his lips gently against hers. It was a chaste kiss, brief and respectful, but Eloise felt warmth spread through her at the contact, at the reality of what she had just done. She had married Samuel Brennan. She was Eloise Brennan now, no longer Eloise Harper, and certainly not the Eloise Crawford she had expected to become. She was someone new, stepping into an unknown future with a man she barely knew. Samuel pulled back, his eyes searching hers. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I do not know," Eloise admitted, "but I think I will be." Preacher Williams closed his Bible with a decisive thump. "I will register the marriage in the town records. You should both sign the certificate." He pulled out a document and laid it on a nearby table, offering them a pen. Samuel signed first, his handwriting surprisingly neat, and then Eloise added her signature below his, the ink drying quickly in the cold air. "What will you do now?" Preacher Williams asked, still looking troubled by the whole affair. Samuel glanced at the windows, where snow continued to fall steadily. "The weather is getting worse. We should find shelter. My horse is tied up outside, but riding back to the ranch in this would be dangerous, especially with 2 of us and Eloise in that dress." Eloise looked down at herself, realizing for the first time the impracticality of her situation. She was wearing a thin white dress and light slippers, clothing meant for a wedding ceremony and reception, not for a snowstorm. Her warm coat was back at her father's house, along with all her other belongings. "The hotel," she suggested. "We could get a room there until the storm passes." Samuel nodded. "That makes sense. Do you need to collect anything from your family's home first?" Eloise thought about returning to her father's house, facing her parents' anger and disappointment, and felt her resolve harden. "No, they left me at the altar. I will not go crawling back to them now." She paused, then added more quietly, "I will need to retrieve my belongings eventually, but not today. Today, I just want to leave this church and try to make sense of what has happened." "All right then," Samuel said. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it around Eloise's shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of leather and horse and something distinctly masculine. "We will get you to the hotel and see about borrowing some warmer clothes." They left the church together, stepping out into the swirling snow. Eloise had never seen anything like it. Thick white flakes falling so fast and heavy that visibility was reduced to mere yards. Samuel's horse, a sturdy bay gelding, stood patiently at the hitching rail, already covered in a layer of white. Samuel untied him and led him by the reins as he and Eloise walked through the snow toward the hotel. The streets of Coloma were nearly deserted, everyone having taken shelter from the unexpected storm. Eloise was grateful for that, not ready to face the curious stares and questions that would surely come. Word would spread soon enough that she had married Samuel Brennan instead of Thomas Crawford, and the gossip would be intense, but for now she had a brief reprieve. The Coloma Hotel was a 2-story wooden building that had seen better days, but was clean and respectable. Samuel tied his horse under the covered area beside the building, and then held the door open for Eloise. The lobby was warm, heated by a large stove, and the proprietor, Mr. Larson, looked up from his desk with surprise. "Miss Harper," he said. Then his eyes took in Samuel and the coat around her shoulders, and understanding dawned. "Or should I say Mrs. Brennan? I heard there was some excitement at the church today." "We need a room," Samuel said, stepping forward. "Preferably one that is warm. We will need it for at least tonight, maybe longer depending on the weather." Mr. Larson pulled out his register book. "I've got a nice room on the second floor, faces south so it gets good light and stays warmer. That will be $2 for the night, $3 if you want meals brought up." Samuel counted out coins from his pocket, and Eloise felt a pang of guilt watching him pay. She had no money of her own, had never needed it growing up in her father's house with everything provided for her. She was entirely dependent on this man now, this stranger who had stepped forward when no one else would. Mr. Larson handed over a key. "Room 7, up the stairs and to the right. I will have my wife bring up some hot water for washing and some extra blankets. And Mrs. Brennan, if you need anything at all, you just let us know." There was kindness in his voice, and Eloise felt her eyes prickle with unexpected tears. "Thank you, Mr. Larson." They climbed the stairs together, neither speaking, the weight of the situation settling over them both. Samuel unlocked the door to room 7 and held it open for Eloise to enter first. The room was simple but clean, with a large bed covered in a worn quilt, a small table with 2 chairs, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the snow-covered street. It was the kind of room meant for travelers passing through, not for newlyweds beginning their married life. Eloise stood in the center of the room, suddenly acutely aware that she was alone with a man, a husband, in a space that contained only one bed. Her mother had given her vague instructions about wifely duties, heavy on euphemism and light on actual information, but Eloise understood the basics of what was expected. The thought made her stomach flutter with nervousness. Samuel seemed to sense her discomfort. He set his hat on the table and cleared his throat. "Eloise, I want you to know that I do not expect anything from you tonight, or any night until you are ready. I know this has all happened very fast and we are strangers to each other. I will not force myself on you. You have my word on that." Eloise felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that. We should probably talk," Samuel continued, pulling out one of the chairs and gesturing for Eloise to sit. We are married now, but we do not really know each other. Maybe we should remedy that." Eloise sat, grateful for the practical suggestion. Samuel took the other chair, stretching out his long legs and looking more relaxed than she felt. Outside, the snow continued to fall, the world beyond the window disappearing into white. "Why do they not you tell me about yourself?" Samuel suggested. "More than I would know from seeing you around town." Eloise considered where to begin. "I am 19 years old. I was born here in Coloma, raised here my whole life. My father is the town assayer, as you know, and my mother is from a good family back east, Philadelphia originally. They came out during the gold rush, thinking to make their fortune, and stayed when they found steady work instead. I have one brother, Marcus, who is 17 and works with my father. I can read and write, like I said, and I am good with numbers. I used to help my father with his books before he decided it was not proper for a young lady." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "I like reading, especially novels and poetry. I can cook and sew well enough, though I am no great talent at either. I like animals, especially horses, and apparently I make very poor choices in men." Samuel's expression was sympathetic. "We all make mistakes." "Sounds like Thomas Crawford fooled a lot of people, not just you." "Perhaps," Eloise said, "but I should have seen something. There should have been signs." "Or he was just good at hiding who he really was," Samuel countered. "Some people are like that, showing the world one face while keeping their true nature hidden." He paused. "My turn, I suppose. I am 25, like I said. I was born in Missouri, grew up on a small farm. My father died when I was 15. Fever took him one winter. My mother tried to keep the farm going, but it was too much for her. She passed 2 years later, and I sold the land to pay debts. After that, I drifted for a while, working odd jobs, trying to figure out what I wanted from life. I came to California when I heard there was work on the ranches, good steady work for men willing to put in long hours. I have been at the bar B for 3 years now, and I like the work. I am good with horses, good with cattle. The owner, Ben Barrett, treats his workers fair and pays decent wages. I have been saving up to buy my own land someday, start my own small ranch. That is the dream anyway." "That sounds like a good dream," Eloise said, trying to imagine this life he was describing, so different from the one she had expected with Thomas Crawford. "What were your plans?" Samuel asked. "With Thomas, I mean. What kind of life were you expecting?" Eloise felt her chest tighten. "Thomas was going to take over his father's business eventually. We were going to live in Coloma, in a nice house on the good side of town. I was going to be a merchant's wife, host dinner parties, join the ladies' committees, raise children, all the things a respectable woman is supposed to do." She realized how hollow it sounded, how little of herself had been in those plans. She had been preparing to become someone's wife, someone's mother, but never just herself. "And is that what you wanted?" Samuel asked, his dark eyes searching hers. "Or what you thought you were supposed to want?" The question struck Eloise like a physical blow, exposing a truth she had not wanted to examine too closely. "I do not know," she admitted. "I never really asked myself that. It was just what was expected, what made sense. Thomas was the right kind of man from the right kind of family, and marrying him would secure my future and please my parents. I thought that was enough." "But you were not happy," Samuel said, and it was not a question. Eloise thought about the months of her engagement to Thomas, the careful planning and preparation, the feeling that something was always slightly off, never quite right. "I thought I would be happy eventually," she said. "I thought happiness would come after the wedding once we settled into married life. But now I wonder if I was just lying to myself." There was a knock at the door, and Samuel rose to answer it. Mrs. Larson stood there with a young girl, both carrying buckets of hot water, extra blankets, and a bundle of what looked like clothing. "Thought you might need these," Mrs. Larson said kindly, bustling into the room. "The clothes belonged to my daughter before she got married and moved to Sacramento. They should fit you well enough, Mrs. Brennan. You cannot stay in that wedding dress, not in this weather." She set everything down and shooed the girl out ahead of her. "I will send up supper in an hour or so. You two take care now." When they were alone again, Eloise looked at the bundle of clothes with gratitude and relief. "I should change," she said. "This dress was never meant to be worn for long." She hesitated, then added, "Could you turn around?" "Of course," Samuel said immediately, turning to face the window. Eloise quickly removed the white dress, grateful to be free of its tight bodice and heavy skirts. Mrs. Larson had provided a simple cotton dress in dark blue, along with a warm woolen shawl and sturdy stockings. The clothes were worn but clean, and they fit reasonably well, if a bit loose in some places. Eloise folded the white dress carefully, unsure what to do with it now. It had been borrowed from a friend, lent with excitement for a wedding that had turned into a disaster. She would need to return it, explain what had happened, face the questions and the gossip. "You can turn around now," she said, and Samuel did, his expression carefully neutral. "Better?" he asked. "Much," Eloise admitted. "I feel more like myself in these clothes." They fell into an awkward silence, neither sure what to do or say next. The reality of their situation was settling in, the enormity of what they had done. They were married, bound together for life, two strangers who had made a decision in haste that they would have to live with forever. "We should probably discuss practical matters," Samuel said finally. "Where we will live, how we will manage. My room at the ranch bunkhouse is not suitable for a married couple. We will need to find something else." "Could we stay at the ranch?" Eloise asked. "Does Mr. Barrett have housing for married workers?" Samuel considered. "He has a few small cabins on the property, but they are all occupied right now. He might be willing to let us use the old foreman's house. It has been empty since the last foreman left 6 months ago, needs some work, but it is solid and weatherproof. I could ask him." "What about my things?" Eloise asked. "My clothes, my books, my personal belongings. They are all at my father's house." "We will get them," Samuel promised. "Once the storm clears, we will go together and collect everything that belongs to you. If your father objects, well, you are married now. You are my wife, and your belongings come with you." Eloise nodded, trying not to think about the confrontation that was likely coming with her parents. Her father would be furious, her mother devastated. They had such high hopes for her marriage to Thomas, such grand plans. This marriage to a cowboy, a man with no family connections and no social standing, would be seen as a catastrophic step down. But as she looked at Samuel, at his honest face and steady gaze, Eloise thought maybe her parents' definition of success was not the only one that mattered. Samuel offered her respect and partnership, honesty and hard work. That had to count for something. The promised supper arrived an hour later, brought by the same young girl who had helped carry up the water. There was beef stew thick with vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and apple pie for dessert. It was simple food, but it was hot and filling, and Eloise realized she had not eaten since early that morning, too nervous about the wedding to have more than a few bites of breakfast. They ate in companionable silence, the tension between them easing somewhat. When they finished, Samuel stacked the dishes outside the door for collection and turned back to find Eloise standing by the window, looking out at the storm. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I have never seen snow like this before." Samuel came to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "It snowed heavy in Missouri sometimes. I used to love it when I was a kid, the way it made everything clean and quiet. "It feels like the world has stopped," Eloise murmured, "like we are the only two people left." "Maybe that is good," Samuel said. "Gives us time to figure things out between us before we have to face everyone else." Eloise turned to look at him, studying his profile in the lamplight. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, not like Thomas with his refined features and carefully groomed appearance. But there was something appealing about Samuel's rough edges, his weathered strength, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. She wondered what it would be like to really know him, to understand the thoughts behind those dark eyes. "Tell me something true," she said impulsively. "Something you have never told anyone else." Samuel looked surprised by the request, but he considered it seriously. "All right, something true." He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I am scared most of the time," he said finally. "Scared I will never amount to anything, never have anything of my own, never matter to anyone. I work hard and save my money and make plans, but in the back of my mind, there is always this fear that it is all for nothing, that I will die alone and forgotten with nothing to show for my life." He glanced at her, his expression vulnerable. "That is why I offered to marry you. Not just to help you, though that is part of it, but because I saw a chance to matter to someone, to be important in someone's life, and I took it." Eloise felt her heart squeeze at his honesty. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly. "And you matter to me, Samuel Brennan. Maybe not in the way you would want yet, but you matter because you stepped forward when no one else would, because you offered me a way out when I thought I had none." Samuel smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face and made him look younger. "Your turn. Tell me something true." Eloise thought about what truth to share, what piece of herself to offer this stranger who was now her husband. "I am angry," she said finally. "So angry I can barely stand it, not just at Thomas and Victoria, though I am furious with them, but at my parents for leaving me alone, at the town for gossiping and pitying me, at the whole world for making me feel like my worth depends on whether some man chooses me. I spent my whole life being good, being proper, doing what I was told, and it got me nothing but humiliation. Part of me wants to burn it all down, every expectation and rule and proper behavior." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Instead, I married you, a stranger, in what is probably the most improper thing I have ever done, and I do not regret it. I should, but I do not." "I am glad you do not regret it," Samuel said, "because I do not either." They stood together at the window, watching the snow fall, and Eloise felt something shift between them, some small connection forming. They were strangers still, but they were strangers who had chosen each other, who had taken a leap of faith together. Maybe that was enough to build on. As the night grew later, the awkwardness returned. There was still only one bed, and eventually they would have to decide what to do about it. "I can sleep on the floor," Samuel offered. "With the extra blankets, I will be comfortable enough." Eloise looked at the bed, then at Samuel, then back at the bed. "That is ridiculous. The floor is cold and hard, and you have done nothing to deserve such discomfort. We are both adults and we are married. We can share the bed without anything improper happening." Samuel looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Eloise said, with more confidence than she felt. "Just stay on your side and I will stay on mine." They prepared for bed with careful attention to modesty. Samuel turned his back while Eloise removed her outer dress and climbed under the covers in her chemise and stockings. Then she closed her eyes while he removed his boots and outer clothes, climbing in on the other side in his undershirt and trousers. There was a clear space between them, a careful gap that neither crossed. The bed was comfortable, far better than the floor would have been, and Eloise was exhausted from the emotional upheaval of the day. She lay in the darkness, listening to Samuel's breathing, trying not to think about the fact that she was sharing a bed with a man for the first time in her life. "Samuel," she whispered after a while. "Yes, thank you for today, for stepping forward. Whatever happens next, whatever our life together looks like, thank you for giving me a choice when I thought I had none." "You are welcome," Samuel said quietly. "And Eloise, thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on me. I promise I will do my best to make sure you do not regret it." Eloise closed her eyes, feeling tears slide down her cheeks onto the pillow. They were not tears of sadness, exactly, but of release, of letting go of the life she had planned and accepting the unknown future stretching before her. She had married a cowboy in a snowstorm, had tied her life to a stranger's on a moment's impulse. It was mad and reckless and completely unlike anything she had ever done before. It was also, she realized, the first truly free choice she had ever made in her life. And that thought, more than anything else, let her finally relax into sleep. The next morning, Eloise woke to pale sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices in the street below. The storm had passed during the night, leaving Coloma blanketed in pristine white. Samuel was already awake, dressed and standing by the window, and he turned when he heard her stir. "Morning," he said. "The snow stopped. Roads should be passable by this afternoon." Eloise sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders against the cold. "What happens now?" "Now we face the world," Samuel said. "We collect your things from your parents' house, talk to Ben Barrett about housing at the ranch, and start building our life together, if you are still willing." "I am still willing," Eloise confirmed. In the clear light of morning, without the emotion and drama of the previous day, she examined her decision and found that it still held. She was married to Samuel Brennan, and she would make the best of it. They breakfasted in the hotel dining room, aware of the stares and whispers from the other guests. News of their hasty marriage had clearly spread through town overnight. Eloise held her head high, refusing to show weakness or doubt. Let them talk. Let them gossip. She knew the truth of what had happened, and that would have to be enough. After breakfast, they walked together through the snow-covered streets to her parents' house. It was a fine home by Coloma standards, 2 stories with painted shutters and a well-maintained fence. Eloise had grown up here, had believed she would live here until her wedding day, and then move into a similar home with her new husband. Instead, she was here to collect her belongings and say goodbye to her old life. Her father answered the door, his face going red when he saw her. "Eloise, I heard what you did. I heard you married that cowboy." "His name is Samuel Brennan," Eloise said calmly. "And yes, I married him. I am here to collect my belongings." "You are not taking anything from this house," her father blustered. "You made your choice, a foolish, impulsive choice, and now you can live with the consequences." "James," her mother's voice came from inside, tired and sad. "Let her have her things. She is our daughter, whatever she has done." Samuel stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Eloise. "Sir, with respect, Eloise is my wife now. Her belongings are hers by right, and I am here to make sure she gets them. We can do this peacefully, or we can involve the sheriff. Your choice." Eloise's father looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Samuel's steady gaze made him back down. "Fine. Take your things and go, but do not come crying back here when you realize what a mistake you have made." Eloise pushed past her father into the house, Samuel following close behind. Her mother was standing in the hallway, her eyes red from crying. "Eloise, how could you? How could you throw away your life like this?" "I did not throw away my life, Mother. I saved it. Thomas Crawford left me at the altar. Everyone in town knows it. I would have spent the rest of my life as an object of pity and gossip if I had not done something. Samuel gave me a way out." "But you do not even know him," her mother protested. "I did not know Thomas either, apparently." Eloise countered. At least Samuel is honest about who he is and what he wants. She brushed past her mother and climbed the stairs to her room, the room she had slept in for 19 years. It looked the same as always. The narrow bed with its colorful quilt, the wardrobe full of her clothes, the shelf full of her beloved books, the small desk where she had written letters and practiced her figures. She felt a pang of loss, of leaving behind her childhood, but she pushed it aside and began packing. Samuel helped her, carrying boxes and trunks down to the wagon he had borrowed from the hotel. Eloise packed her clothes, her books, her few pieces of jewelry, the quilts her grandmother had made, the photographs of her family, everything that was truly hers. Her mother stood in the doorway, wringing her hands, occasionally trying to convince Eloise to reconsider, but her father stayed in his study, too angry or too proud to show his face again. When everything was loaded, Eloise stood in the hallway of her childhood home one last time. "I am sorry this is not what you wanted for me," she told her mother, "but it is my life and I have made my choice. I hope someday you can understand that." Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, tears soaking into Eloise's shoulder. "Be careful, my darling, be safe. And if you ever need anything, if he ever hurts you or treats you badly, you come home. Promise me." "I promise," Eloise whispered, though she had no intention of ever needing that refuge. She had burned her bridges here. There was no going back. They left the Harper house behind, Samuel driving the wagon carefully through the snow-covered streets. Eloise did not look back. She kept her eyes forward, on the road ahead, on the unknown future she had chosen. The Bar B Ranch was a few miles outside of town, a sprawling operation that covered several thousand acres of rolling foothill country. The main house was a large, comfortable structure where Ben Barrett lived with his wife and 3 daughters. There were barns and corrals, a bunkhouse for the single men, and several small cabins scattered across the property where married workers lived with their families. Samuel drove the wagon up to the main house and helped Eloise down. "Wait here," he said. "I will go talk to Ben." Eloise stood in the cold, watching Samuel disappear into the house. She was nervous about meeting his employer, worried that Ben Barrett might object to having a new wife suddenly appear, might think Samuel had been irresponsible or impulsive. But Samuel emerged a few minutes later with a broad smile on his face. "Ben says we can use the old foreman's house. He has been meaning to fix it up anyway, and he figures having us there will motivate him to do the work. He also says welcome to the ranch, and his wife wants to meet you." Eloise followed Samuel inside, where Ben Barrett turned out to be a large, jovial man in his 50s with a booming laugh and a firm handshake. His wife, Margaret, was a plump, kind-faced woman who immediately pulled Eloise into a warm embrace. "We heard what happened in town," Margaret said. "That Crawford boy leaving you like that. Shameful, absolutely shameful. But Samuel here is a good man, one of our best workers. You will be happy with him, I think." "I hope so," Eloise said, grateful for the welcome. Ben Barrett drove them to the foreman's house in his own wagon, followed by Samuel in the borrowed one. The house was small, just 2 rooms with a loft above, but it was well built and weatherproof as Samuel had promised. There was a stone fireplace, a cast iron stove for cooking, windows with real glass and a sturdy door. It needed cleaning and some basic repairs, but Eloise could see the potential. "I will send some men over to help with repairs," Ben said. "And Margaret will bring by some household goods to get you started, linens and dishes and such. You 2 settle in, and Samuel, take a few days off to get your house in order. You have earned it." After Ben left, Eloise and Samuel stood in the middle of their new home, surrounded by boxes and uncertainty. This was it, Eloise realized. This was where they would build their life together, in this small house on the edge of someone else's land. It was so far from what she had imagined her future would be, and yet standing there with Samuel, she felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "It is not much," Samuel said, looking around, "but it is ours, at least for now, and it is a start." "It is perfect," Eloise said, surprising herself by meaning it. "Let us make it home." They spent the next week working on the house, cleaning and repairing, making it livable. Samuel fixed the broken window shutters and patched holes in the roof, while Eloise scrubbed floors and walls and windows until they gleamed. Margaret Barrett was true to her word, bringing by dishes and linens, pots and pans, even some preserves and dried goods to stock the pantry. Other ranch families stopped by with gifts and welcomes, curious about the new bride but friendly and kind. Eloise discovered that she liked the work, the physical labor of building a home. It was so different from the idle, ornamental life she had been preparing for as Thomas Crawford's wife. Here, she was needed and useful. Samuel treated her as a true partner, asking her opinion on decisions, valuing her input. They worked side by side, and slowly, gradually, they began to know each other. At night, they still maintained their careful distance in the bed they shared, neither pushing for more than the other was ready to give. But the distance was shrinking, Eloise noticed. They would wake tangled together sometimes, drawn to each other's warmth in sleep. Samuel's arm would be around her waist, or her head would be pillowed on his shoulder, and neither would pull away immediately, both lingering in the comfort of the closeness. One evening, about 2 weeks after their wedding, they were sitting by the fire after supper. Samuel was repairing a bridle, and Eloise was mending a shirt, both engaged in the quiet domestic work that filled their evenings. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer awkward or strained. "I went into town today," Samuel said suddenly. "Picked up supplies at the general store." People were talking. Eloise's hands stilled on the shirt. "What were they saying?" "Most of it was just gossip, wondering how we are getting on, whether you regret marrying me. But some of it was news. Thomas Crawford and Victoria Pemberton got married in Sacramento. It was in the newspaper." Eloise absorbed this information, waiting for the pain she expected to feel. But it did not come. She felt nothing but a distant, vague relief that Thomas was someone else's problem now. "I hope they will be happy together," she said, and meant it. "I hope their marriage built on betrayal and deception brings them everything they deserve." Samuel looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "That is one way to look at it." "I have been thinking," Eloise said slowly, "about what you said that first day about being scared you would never matter to anyone. I understand that feeling now. I spent my whole life trying to matter in the way I was supposed to, being the good daughter, the proper lady, the suitable bride. But I never felt like I mattered for who I actually was, only for who I could pretend to be." "And now," Samuel asked. "Now I am figuring out who I actually am," Eloise said. "And I think maybe with you I can be that person." Samuel set aside his work and moved to sit beside her on the bench. "Eloise, I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you." Eloise's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," Samuel said simply. "I know we agreed this was a practical arrangement, a partnership to benefit us both, and it is that. But it is also more, at least for me. I wake up every morning grateful you are here. I look forward to coming home because you are here. When you laugh, it makes my whole day better. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I know it is too soon and you need time. But I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know that this is real for me." Eloise stared at him, her heart pounding. She thought about the past 2 weeks, about working alongside Samuel, learning his habits and his humor, watching him with the horses and the other ranch workers. She thought about his kindness and his patience, his strength and his gentleness. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how valued, how seen. "I do not know if I am in love with you yet," she said honestly, "but I know I care about you. I know I am happier here with you than I ever was planning a future with Thomas. I know when you smile at me, I feel warm inside. And I know I want to keep learning about you, keep building this life with you and see where it leads." "That is enough," Samuel said softly. "That is more than enough." He reached out and took her hand, the first time he had truly touched her since their wedding kiss, and Eloise felt electricity run through her at the contact. His hand was rough and calloused from hard work, warm and strong, and when his fingers laced with hers, it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a long time. "Can I kiss you?" Samuel asked, his voice low. "A real kiss this time, not just for show." Eloise nodded, not trusting her voice, and Samuel leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. His lips met hers gently at first, tentative and questioning, and then with more confidence when she responded. Eloise felt heat flood through her, felt something awaken inside her that she had never experienced before. This was nothing like the awkward kiss behind the livery stable with Thomas. This was real and honest and full of genuine feeling. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Samuel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I have wanted to do that for days," he admitted. "So have I," Eloise whispered, surprised by the truth of it. That night when they climbed into bed, there was no gap between them. Samuel gathered Eloise into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They did not make love, not yet, both understanding that Eloise needed to be ready for that step. But they held each other through the night, and it felt like a promise of what was to come. The weeks turned into months, winter melting into spring. Eloise and Samuel fell into a rhythm, a partnership that grew deeper and more intimate with each passing day. Samuel taught Eloise to ride the horses, taking her out across the ranch land, showing her the beauty of the rolling hills and distant mountains. Eloise taught Samuel to read better, for while he knew his letters, he had never had much education, and she shared her beloved books with him, reading aloud on quiet evenings. They made love for the first time on a night in early March, when the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom on the hillsides. It was tender and awkward and imperfect, neither of them having much experience, but it was also beautiful in its honesty. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Eloise realized that she had fallen in love with her husband. It had happened gradually, so slowly she had not noticed until it was complete, but the feeling was undeniable. She loved Samuel Brennan, this good, honest, hard-working man who had stepped forward when she needed someone most. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, and felt Samuel's arms tighten around her. "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, requiring long hours of work from all the ranch hands. Eloise helped where she could, learning the rhythms of ranch life, earning the respect of the other workers with her willingness to pitch in. She discovered she had a gift for healing, for tending sick animals and injured men, and soon people were coming to her for help with various ailments. In late April, Ben Barrett approached Samuel with a proposition. The ranch was expanding, buying up adjacent land, and Ben needed someone to oversee the new section. He offered Samuel the position of foreman for the new territory, with a significant increase in pay and the promise of eventually being able to buy his own land from the ranch at a good price. Samuel came home that evening bursting with excitement, pulling Eloise into his arms and spinning her around. "This is it," he said. This is the chance I have been waiting for. In a few years, we could have our own place, our own land. We could build something that is truly ours. Eloise was thrilled for him, for them, for the future that was taking shape. But she had news of her own, news she had been waiting for the right moment to share. "Samuel, I have something to tell you." He set her down, his expression turning concerned at her serious tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Something is very right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Samuel's face went through a series of expressions, shock and disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. "A baby." "We are having a baby." "We are," Eloise confirmed, laughing at his reaction. "Due in late November if my calculations are correct." Samuel pulled her close, holding her as if she were made of glass. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be a family." "We already are a family," Eloise pointed out. "The baby will just make us a bigger one." The next months passed in a blur of preparation and hard work. Samuel thrived in his new role as foreman, proving his capability and earning the respect of the men under him. Eloise prepared for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, reading everything she could find about childbirth and infant care. Her mother came to visit once, tentatively, extending an olive branch. The visit was stiff and awkward, but it was a start, a first step toward reconciliation. In July, Samuel took Eloise to see the land he hoped to buy, a beautiful stretch of rolling meadow with a creek running through it, backed by forested hills. "This is where I want to build our house," he said, standing with his arm around her waist, looking out over the land. "This is where I want our children to grow up. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Eloise said, imagining the life they would build here, the home they would make. "I think it is everything we need." The baby came on a cold night in late November, arriving in a rush after hours of difficult labor. Samuel paced outside while Margaret Barrett and the ranch doctor attended Eloise, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, he rushed in to find his wife exhausted but smiling, holding a squirming bundle. "A son," Eloise said softly. "We have a son." Samuel knelt beside the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger, awestruck by the perfection of the small creature they had created. "He is beautiful," he breathed. "He is perfect." They named him James Samuel, after both their fathers, hoping the name might further the slow reconciliation with Eloise's family. Eloise's parents came to visit when the baby was a week old, and her father held his grandson with tears in his eyes, finally acknowledging that perhaps Eloise's hasty marriage had not been the disaster he had believed. "You seem happy," he told Eloise gruffly. "Happier than I ever saw you with Thomas Crawford." "I am happy, father," Eloise assured him. "Samuel is a good man, and we have built a good life together." The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel bought the land he wanted, and they built their house, a sturdy home with room to grow. Eloise gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter they named Margaret after the kind woman who had welcomed them, and another son they called William. Samuel's ranch prospered, and he became known as a fair employer and a savvy businessman. But more than the material success, they had built something real and lasting, a love that had started from the most unpromising circumstances and grown into something deep and unshakable. They worked side by side, partners in every sense, raising their children and building their life. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Eloise back to the church where they had married, now weathered and aged by a decade of California sun and storms. They stood at the altar where she had once stood alone, humiliated and heartbroken, and he took her hands in his. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every moment, every choice, every step that led me to that church on that snowy day, I would step forward 1,000 times to marry you." Eloise felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for saving me that day." "You did not need saving," Samuel replied. "You saved yourself by having the courage to take a chance on me. All I did was offer you the opportunity." "We saved each other," Eloise said, and knew it was true. She had saved him from loneliness and a life without meaning. He had saved her from shame and a life without love. Together, they had built something neither could have created alone. They walked out of the church hand in hand, into the bright California sunshine, and drove home to the land they owned, and the children they cherished, and the life they had forged from nothing but courage and faith. The snow had fallen the day she stood at the altar alone, and a cowboy had stepped forward to marry her, and that impossible moment had become the foundation of everything good in her life. As the years continued to pass, their children grew strong and capable. James, their eldest, had his father's steady nature and his mother's quick mind, growing into a tall, serious young man who loved working the land. Margaret, named for the woman who had shown them such kindness, had her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart, bright and curious about everything. William, the youngest, was the adventurous one, always exploring, always asking questions, keeping them on their toes. The ranch expanded slowly over the years, as Samuel bought adjacent parcels when they became available. He never forgot his roots as a working cowboy, treating his own employees with the same fairness and respect Ben Barrett had shown him. Men wanted to work for Samuel Brennan because they knew they would be paid honestly and treated decently, and that reputation meant he could hire the best workers available. Eloise became known throughout the region as a healer, her natural gift for tending the sick and injured growing with study and experience. She ordered medical books from San Francisco, learning everything she could, and soon people were traveling from miles around to seek her help. She never charged for her services, seeing it as a way to give back to the community that had accepted her, but grateful patients paid in other ways, with fresh eggs and garden vegetables, with handmade goods and labor on the ranch. She also became an advocate for women's education, convinced that girls should have the same opportunities as boys to learn and grow. She started a small school in Coloma, teaching reading and writing and arithmetic to any child whose parents would send them. It was controversial at first, especially teaching girls past the basic level, but Eloise was persistent, and gradually attitudes began to shift. Samuel supported her in everything, proud of his wife's intelligence and capability. Their marriage had evolved from that desperate beginning into a true partnership, each respecting the other's strengths, each supporting the other's dreams. They still worked side by side, still talked late into the night about their hopes and plans, still found joy in each other's company. When James turned 18, Samuel gave him a portion of land to start his own place, helping him build a house and stock it with cattle. It was bittersweet watching their eldest son start his own life, but Samuel remembered how important it had been to him to have something of his own, and he wanted to give his son that same opportunity. Margaret showed no interest in marrying young, much to Eloise's secret relief. She wanted to study medicine properly, to go to a real medical school and become a doctor. It was an ambitious dream for a woman in the 1870s, but Eloise and Samuel encouraged her, saving money to send her east to one of the few schools that accepted female students. William, at 15, was still figuring out his path, torn between his love of the land and his curiosity about the wider world. Samuel told him there was no rush to decide, that he had time to explore and learn before committing to a direction. Eloise's relationship with her parents had healed over the years, though it would never be as close as it might have been if she had followed their chosen path. Her father had eventually admitted that Samuel was a better man than Thomas Crawford had ever been, and her mother doted on her grandchildren, finding joy in them that softened her disappointment over Eloise's unconventional choices. Thomas Crawford and Victoria Pemberton's marriage had not fared as well. They had burned through his father's money in Sacramento, then moved to San Francisco, where they burned through Victoria's savings as well. The marriage ended in scandal and divorce, with Thomas eventually returning to Coloma broken and humbled, working as a clerk in his father's store, a shadow of the confident man he had once been. Eloise saw him occasionally in town and felt only pity. The life she had lost had turned out to be no loss at all. Ben Barrett passed away in 1875, leaving the Bar B Ranch to his daughters and their families. Samuel attended the funeral and spoke about what Ben had meant to him, how one man's kindness and fairness had changed the trajectory of his entire life. It was Ben who had given him steady work when he was just a drifter, Ben who had promoted him to foreman, Ben who had sold him his first parcel of land at a fair price. Without Ben Barrett, Samuel Brennan would not have become the man he was. Margaret Barrett, widowed now but still strong, remained a close friend to both Samuel and Eloise. She was a doting honorary grandmother to their children, and she told anyone who would listen the story of how Eloise and Samuel had married in a snowstorm, how sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. As Samuel and Eloise entered middle age, they found their love had only deepened with time. The passionate intensity of youth had mellowed into something even better, a profound companionship, a knowing of each other so complete that words were often unnecessary. They could communicate with a glance across a room, could sense each other's moods and needs, could work together in perfect synchrony. They still made time for each other, still went riding together across their land, still sat by the fire on winter evenings reading and talking. Samuel still told Eloise she was beautiful, and she still believed him because she saw the truth of it in his eyes. Their physical relationship had evolved over the years, but remained vibrant and satisfying, a celebration of their connection. In 1880, on the 21st anniversary of their wedding, Samuel planned a surprise for Eloise. He had contacted the preacher, now retired but still living in Coloma, and arranged for them to renew their vows in the same church where they had married. He invited their children, now grown or nearly so, and a few close friends. When Samuel brought Eloise to the church, telling her only that he had a surprise, she was confused until she walked through the doors and saw the gathering inside, the flowers decorating the altar, the expectant faces turned toward her. "Samuel, what is this?" she asked. 21 years ago we got married in this church," Samuel said, taking her hands. It was desperate and rushed, two strangers making a leap of faith. "I want to do it again, but this time as two people who know each other completely, who have built a life together, who have loved each other through joy and hardship. I want to renew my vows to you, Eloise, and recommit myself to our marriage, not out of desperation or practicality but out of pure love." Eloise felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the gesture. They stood once more at the altar, but this time surrounded by their children and friends, by the evidence of the life they had built. This time there was no snow falling, no humiliation or heartbreak, only love and gratitude and joy. The retired preacher spoke about the faithfulness of God and the resilience of love, about how sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the most difficult circumstances. Samuel and Eloise repeated their vows, meaning every word more deeply than they had the first time, and when Samuel kissed his wife, their children cheered and applauded. After the ceremony, They had a celebration at their ranch, with food and music and dancing. James brought his new wife, a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch. Margaret came home from medical school for the occasion, full of stories about her studies and her plans. William danced with every girl present, charming and flirtatious, making his parents laugh. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, Samuel and Eloise stood together watching their family and friends celebrate. Samuel put his arm around his wife, pulling her close. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not walked into that church that day?" he asked. Eloise considered the question. "Sometimes, but I think somehow we would have found each other. I think we were meant to be together, and the universe just gave us a push in the right direction." "A push in the form of a snowstorm and a runaway groom," Samuel said with a smile. "The best push I ever received," Eloise replied. They stood together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, comfortable in the silence, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. Their love story had started with an act of desperation and courage, but it had become something extraordinary through years of work and commitment and genuine affection. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. Margaret graduated from medical school and returned to California, setting up a practice in Sacramento but visiting home often. She eventually married a fellow doctor, a kind man who respected her intelligence and ambition, and they had 3 children together. James took over more of the ranch operations as Samuel began to slow down, though Samuel remained active and involved well into his 60s. James proved to be an excellent rancher, combining his father's work ethic with innovative ideas about breeding and land management. He and his wife had 5 children, filling the ranch with the next generation. William surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, moving to San Francisco but returning home regularly. He used his legal skills to help small ranchers and farmers fight against the large land companies that were trying to squeeze them out, earning a reputation as a champion of the common man. He married late, in his 30s, to a suffragette who matched his passion for justice. Eloise and Samuel became grandparents many times over, and their home was often filled with the laughter and chaos of visiting grandchildren. They took joy in watching their legacy continue, in seeing their values passed down to the next generation. In the late 1880s, as California modernized and the Wild West gradually became tame, Samuel and Eloise found themselves regarded as pioneers, as people who had helped build the state from rough frontier territory into a prosperous, settled place. Historians came to interview them, wanting to capture their stories before that generation passed away. Samuel always insisted on telling the truth of how they met, how Eloise had been left at the altar, and he had stepped forward to marry her. Some people thought it was unromantic, that he should embellish the story, make it more dramatic or traditionally romantic. But Samuel disagreed. "The truth is romantic enough," he would say. "The truth is that 2 strangers took a chance on each other, built something real from nothing, and loved each other faithfully for decades. What is more romantic than that?" Eloise agreed wholeheartedly. Their love story was not one of love at first sight or fairy tale perfection. It was a story of choice and commitment, of 2 people who decided every day to keep choosing each other, to keep building their life together, to keep loving even when it was hard. As they entered their 60s, both Samuel and Eloise remained healthy and active, still working the ranch, still involved in their community. They had achieved everything they had dreamed of that first day in the church, and more besides. They owned their land free and clear, had raised children who were happy and successful, had built a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. But more important than any material success was the love they shared, a love that had only grown stronger with time. They had proven that a marriage born of desperation could become something beautiful, that strangers could become soulmates, that love was not just a feeling, but a choice made every single day. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the land they loved, holding hands as they had for decades. Sometimes they would talk, sharing memories and making plans. Sometimes they would simply sit in companionable silence, comfortable enough with each other to not need words. Samuel would look at his wife, her hair now silver instead of the rich brown. It had been when they married, her face lined with the experiences of a full life, and he would think she had never been more beautiful. Eloise would look at her husband, his body bearing the marks of decades of hard work, his face weathered by years in the sun, and she would think she had never loved him more. Their grandchildren loved to hear the story of how they met, begging for it again and again. Samuel and Eloise would take turns telling it, embellishing certain parts for dramatic effect, but always returning to the core truth. Snow had fallen the day Eloise stood at the altar alone. Samuel had stepped forward and said he would marry her. She had said yes. Everything else had followed from that moment of courage and faith. "But Grandma," one granddaughter asked once, "were you not scared? Did you not worry you were making a mistake?" "Of course I was scared," Eloise replied honestly. "I was terrified. But I was more scared of doing nothing, of letting fear trap me in a life of shame and limitation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a leap into the unknown." "And Grandpa," a grandson asked, "why did you do it? Why did you marry someone you did not know?" Samuel thought about his answer carefully. "I saw someone who needed help, and I had the power to provide it. I saw an opportunity to be important to someone, to matter in someone's life. And I saw a good woman who deserved better than what she had been given. It seemed like the right thing to do, and it turned out to be the best decision I ever made." The grandchildren would nod sagely, filing away these pearls of wisdom, and Samuel and Eloise would exchange smiles, knowing that their story would be told and retold long after they were gone, an example of how love could triumph over the most unlikely circumstances. As they approached their 70th birthdays, Samuel and Eloise began to talk about what would happen when one of them inevitably passed before the other. It was a difficult conversation, one they had avoided for years, but it needed to be had. "I cannot imagine life without you," Samuel admitted one night as they lay in bed, the same bed they had shared since their wedding night, now worn and comfortable with decades of use. "Nor I without you," Eloise replied. "But we have to face the reality that one of us will be left behind eventually. We need to make plans, ensure that whoever remains is taken care of." They talked through the night, making arrangements, discussing their wishes. Samuel wanted to be buried on their land, under the oak tree where he had first told Eloise he loved her. Eloise wanted the same. They wrote out detailed instructions for their children, ensuring that the ranch would be divided fairly, that their grandchildren would be provided for, that their legacy would continue. But they also made a pact. Whoever was left behind would not waste time grieving excessively. They would honor the other's memory by continuing to live fully, by taking joy in their children and grandchildren, by remembering the happiness they had shared rather than dwelling on the loss. "We have been so lucky," Eloise said as the sun began to rise, painting their bedroom in soft golden light. "To have found each other, to have built this life. Not everyone gets that." "The luckiest," Samuel agreed, pulling her close. "But it was not just luck, Eloise. It was choice. We chose each other, and we kept choosing each other every day for more than 30 years. That is not luck. That is love." They celebrated their 35th anniversary in 1894, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, by friends and neighbors and community members whose lives they had touched. It was a joyous occasion, a celebration not just of their marriage, but of the legacy they had built. Samuel gave a speech that had many people in tears. He talked about that snowy day in 1859, about the desperate young woman and the lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on each other. He talked about the years of hard work and struggle, of building a life from nothing. He talked about the joy of watching their children grow, the satisfaction of achieving their dreams. And he talked about love, real love, the kind that lasted and deepened and sustained through everything life could throw at it. "I have lived a good life," Samuel concluded, his voice strong despite his age. "A life full of purpose and meaning and joy. And every bit of that goodness is because one day, in a moment of courage or madness or divine intervention, Eloise Harper said yes to marrying a stranger. She took a chance on me, and I spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that chance. I hope I succeeded." Eloise stood and embraced her husband, both of them crying now, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment and the gratitude for their shared journey. Their children gathered around them, and their grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, 3 generations of the legacy they had created together. The party continued into the night, with music and dancing and laughter echoing across the ranch land they loved. As the evening wound down, Samuel and Eloise slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand to the oak tree where so many important moments of their life had taken place. They stood under its spreading branches, now grown massive over the decades, and looked up at the stars visible in the clear night sky. "I would not change anything," Eloise said softly. "Not a single moment, not a single choice. It has all been perfect, even the hard parts." "Even Thomas leaving you at the altar," Samuel teased gently. "Especially that," Eloise replied, "because it led me to you, and you have been the greatest gift of my life." Samuel kissed his wife then, a kiss full of 35 years of love and partnership and devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Let us go home," Samuel said. "Let us go back to our family and celebrate the life we have built together." They walked back toward the house, where lights blazed and music played and their loved ones gathered. The ranch spread out around them in the darkness, the land they had worked and loved and passed on to their children. The house they had built with their own hands stood solid and welcoming, a testament to what could be achieved through determination and cooperation. As they reached the porch, Samuel stopped and turned to Eloise one more time. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saying yes, for taking a chance, for building this life with me. Thank you for everything." "Thank you for stepping forward," Eloise replied. "For offering me a future when I thought I had none. For being the best partner I could have ever asked for. Thank you for loving me." They went inside together, joining their family, and the celebration continued into the night. And as snow began to fall outside, unseasonable and unexpected, just as it had on their wedding day 35 years earlier, Samuel and Eloise stood together surrounded by the people they loved most, grateful beyond measure for the life they had built from that one moment of courage in a small church in Coloma, California. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in white, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. And as Samuel held his wife close, watching their family laugh and celebrate around them, he knew that stepping forward that day had been the best decision he had ever made. Eloise had needed someone to save her from humiliation and ruin. Samuel had needed someone to make his life matter. Together, they had given each other everything they needed and more besides. Their love story was not perfect or traditional. It had started in desperation and uncertainty. but it had become something extraordinary, a testament to the power of choice and commitment and genuine love. They had proven that strangers could become soulmates, that practical arrangements could transform into passionate devotion, that love was not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing each other every single day. And as the snow fell and the celebration continued around them, Samuel and Eloise knew with absolute certainty that they would choose each other again, 1,000 times over in this life and whatever came after. Their love story, born in a moment of crisis and courage, had become eternal,